Former auto executives warning that companies should pump the brakes on the EV push, saying that the transition to electric happened, quote, too soon and too fast. Former Chrysler CEO Bob Nardelli is one of those executives, and he joins us now. Bob, it's great to have you on the program, and you were interviewed for our digital platform along with Bob Lutz, who's a former executive at Ford, Chrysler, and GM. He echoed your sentiments as well. At the end of the day, I think it's fair to say when it comes to EVs in this country right now, the cart was put before the horse. Your thoughts?
Well, Jackie, there's no question about that. When I was running Chrysler back in 7, 8, and 9, the Obama and Biden administration tried a very similar tactic. It was called the CAFE standards, and basically was restricting the size of the vehicles we could produce. In other words, putting a cap on SUVs and trucks and forcing us into smaller vehicles to improve the average gas mileage. Now, we did a lot of work, Bob Lutz, I, and all the folks at the OEM did a lot of work to improve gas mileage. But the consumer said, stop, you're not going to force me to buy something I don't want. So there's about 278 million cars on the road today. It's called the car park. A small majority of those are electric. And what happened here, Jackie, is the consumer went from about 11 years of average age of their vehicles. It's now up over 12 and a half years. So they basically said, I'll keep my car. I'm not going to buy electric, and we'll see what happens. Well, the other thing about this, Jackie, is if you think about the number of gas stations available for ICE engines, internal combustion engines, it's about 196,000. Now compare that to EV charging stations. There's about 64,000. And oh, by the way, Jeff knows this from his trip. Sometimes they don't work. Right. Sometimes they're not hooked to a grid.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I gotta tell you guys, this interview right here featuring Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg for the Biden administration and CBS anchor Margaret Brennan was a pretty good interview, because this is a rare situation where a mainstream liberal media host is actually using the facts correctly to criticize the Biden administration and the government agenda. In this case, what she's criticizing is the failed green revolution by the Biden administration, okay? Biden is spending a ton of government dollars to force people to adopt electric vehicles. However, if you've read the news lately about electric vehicles, that's not going well, okay? The EV revolution is slumping. Consumers do not want electric vehicles. They make up a tiny portion of the market for all vehicles being sold, and the demand is not increasing the way that it was expected. Now, Obama tried to do this under his administration. He tried to basically force EVs onto the American people. It didn't work. Biden's now trying to do this, and it seems like it's not working. In fact, you have massive layoffs happening from some automakers like Tesla. You have a lot of these manufacturers cutting back on EV production because it's just not working out. You can't force people to buy a car that hasn't proven to be reliable. There are a number of reasons for this, okay? I mean, you have electric vehicle charging stations that are rarely available, okay? And the ones that are available, some of them are broken, right? It's like, a lot of the stations don't even work, okay? It gets too cold, the vehicles basically die. They're not dependable for long-term travel. If you get in an accident with the car, it is extremely expensive to fix the vehicle because of all of the components that are extremely sensitive in electric, which means that the cost to insure the vehicle is much more than a gas-powered vehicle. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the market's just not there, right? But Biden is trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It's to the point now where the facts have made this liberal media anchor, Margaret Brennan, basically admit that, hey, Trump is not wrong, okay? And she's going to present the facts to Pete Buttigieg, and I got to tell you guys, it's pretty humiliating the amount of money that the government has spent on EVs, including infrastructure for them in order to make the vehicles more attractive to consumers. But because it's the government, they're extremely inefficient at actually getting stuff done. And it's just wasteful, right? It just really is. It's embarrassing, okay? It is humiliating for the Biden administration. And I want to talk about it, but first, I got to let you guys know you can profit from the government trying to force the electric vehicle revolution by investing in precious metals, which is why the sponsor of this video is Noble Gold. The US dollar has lost 20% of global foreign exchange reserves, and our national debt is quickly approaching 35 trillion. No, our economy is not in great shape. Those stunning job reports that are released by the government are artificial part-time jobs. Our increasing GDP is driven by spending money that we printed. Our economy is failing and nobody is listening. Save yourself, save your family, save your future with gold. From central banks to billionaires, gold is the hedge that everybody runs to. Noble Gold can help you. From day one, you work with the same dedicated, all-American expert. Whether you're a beginner or you're an expert, Noble Gold Investments will make sure that you get all the help that you need. And this month, Noble Gold Investments will give away a free gold coin to everyone who opens up a qualified account. Just use promo code GOLD. Go to noblegoldinvestments.com. That is noblegoldinvestments.com. And just remember, there's a risk with every investment and there's no guarantee of any kind.
I want to ask you about something that we hear quite a lot about on the campaign trail, and that is electric cars, electric vehicles. Donald Trump repeatedly talks about President Biden's decision to force the industry towards making 56% of car batteries electric by 2032, 13% hybrid. Listen to what he said in New Jersey recently.
Do you notice he's trying to save the electrical vehicle, but not the gas-powered, which is the vehicle that everybody wants? They're going crazy with the electric car, costing us a fortune. We're spending hundreds of billions of dollars subsidizing a car that nobody wants and nobody's ever going to buy.
He's not wrong
on
the purchasing. He's not. Of the 4 million vehicles purchased, 269,000 electric vehicles were sold in the U.S. market. It's up like 2%.
Every single year, more Americans buy EVs
but
than the year. Well, this is really important.
More quickly?
Every single year, more Americans buy EVs than the year prior. There are two things that I think are needed for that to happen even more quickly. One is the price, which is why the Inflation Reduction Act acted to cut the price of an electric vehicle.
AKA using taxpayer dollars to subsidize the purchase of an electric vehicle, right? Let's be more specific about what it actually really did. It took our taxpayer dollars and it basically said, hey, here's a tax credit if you purchase an electric vehicle. Again, the government trying to intervene in a market that's just not there. And again, this is the reason why it's not working, is because government intervention is inefficient. The government, they're not good at capital allocation, okay? They don't understand how industries work. They don't understand how consumer demand works. They don't understand how any of this stuff works. They just want to force this down people's throats, and they're doing that by sending your money, giving your money to people who want to purchase electric vehicles just for the sake of trying to fight climate change, even though you could argue that you're not really fighting climate change because you're just shifting the pollution. That's all you're doing, okay? I mean, these vehicles still have to be powered by fossil fuels, just not directly, right? It's more indirect, because in order to power the electric grid that these cars use in order to charge, right, you need fossil fuels, okay? In order to mine, manufacture, and produce lithium batteries that are needed for electric vehicles, you need fossil fuels. Also, that process in and of itself creates massive greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, you could argue that it is worse for the climate than producing fossil fuel vehicle batteries. The average lithium ion battery takes 3 times as much cumulative energy demand than for the generic battery, right? So when you talk about this climate change conversation, it's not really doing anything to fight climate change when we're talking about electric vehicles as being the answer to that, right? At least I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that it's better for the environment. We haven't even gotten into the issues associated with the health of the individuals that have to mine these batteries, okay? And the fact that they're exposed to these dangerous materials during the mining process. Also, in some cases, you have child labor involved. There's just so much we can get into when it comes to the silliness behind the climate change, the green agenda. But yeah, I mean, I just personally think that it has been a disaster thus far.
The second is making sure we have the charging network we need across America. Even though most EV owners will do most of their charging at home, if you live in an apartment building or you're driving long distances, you need other options in those chargers. So that's exactly what we're working on. But I want to talk about the bigger point here. And I take this very personally because I grew up in the industrial Midwest, literally in the shadow of broken down factories from car companies that did not survive into the turn of the century because they
And
didn't
many
keep
of those
up
auto
with the
workers
times.
are concerned that electric vehicles require fewer humans to manufacture.
The most important thing is that the EV revolution will happen with or without us, and we've got to make sure that it's American-led. And that's what the president is focused on. We don't want China. Look, under the Trump administration, they allowed China to build an advantage in the EV industry. But under President Biden's leadership, we're making sure that the EV revolution will be a made in America EV revolution that is
because of these tariffs
critically
we're
important.
talking about that President Biden says he's going to roll
Also,
out.
just making sure we invest in America's capacity, making sure that we are onshoring or friendshoring the materials and the processing of what goes into these EVs, making sure that America masters these processes. Because look, there's no way that we're going to get to the middle of this century with the technology that we counted on a century ago. Now, there are obviously a lot of voices here in Washington who are interested in keeping the status quo.
He says it's going to be one of the first things he does.
Would
if
be
he's
happy to
reelected.
see Americans trapped with dirty and expensive fuels. But the reality, and I know he's made a lot of promises to the oil and gas CEOs about some of the favors that he believes
But
his
it
administration
obviously is
will deliver
resonating
them.
for him because he wouldn't bring it up so frequently if there wasn't some anxiety that he's tapping into. And let me ask you about a portion of this that I think does fall under your portfolio, and that's the charging stations you mentioned. The Federal Highway Administration says only 7 or 8 charging stations have been produced with a $7.5 billion investment that taxpayers made back in 2021. Why isn't that happening more quickly?
So before he answers this question, I want you guys to understand just how crazy this is, right? $7.5 billion from taxpayers, our dollars, government dollars, to build charging stations. Again, these are the government projects. This is how inefficient the government is. This is where libertarians really shine, right? On issues like this. Shout out to my libertarians, okay? This is where they really shine. $7.5 billion. What has been the result of that amount of money invested by the American people in this government project of building charging stations to make it so EVs are more attractive when you're talking about long distance trips and to try to alleviate travel anxiety when it comes to traveling long distance in an electric vehicle car? How many stations have been built? 7 or 8 by the government. 7 or 8, okay, on the federal highway system. And it's been how many years now? 3? 2 or 3? $7.5 billion. And what you have to show for it in 2 to 3 years is just 7 or 8 charging stations. That is how inefficient the government is, guys. And now you can easily see why the green revolution or the electric vehicle revolution is failing. Because despite billions of dollars in subsidies from the government, they can't competently and efficiently build an infrastructure to support what they're trying to do, right? While at the same time trying to force people to buy the vehicle, trying to force manufacturers to produce the vehicles, and they still can't get it right, right? This is, again, why I try to tell you guys, the government, unlike a business, they're not good at capital allocation. This is why I don't like giving the government my money, right? And people say, oh, you're selfish for not wanting to pay taxes. No, I'm not selfish for not wanting to pay taxes. I'm just telling you that the government doesn't have a good track record of using our tax dollars efficiently. This is a prime example of that. If the government was a business, right, the CEO would be fired, right, for these types of failed projects. $7.5 billion, and you've only produced 7 to 8 charging stations in 3 years. That's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. But yet, again, the government doesn't face the same accountability as a business does, right? And then you can see the difference between the free market, the private sector, and the public sector. The government, when it comes to investing, quite simply are terrible at it, right? They're inefficient. There's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. And the green agenda is a part of that. It's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, again, the fundamental problem that they're going to have, even if they could build the charging stations efficiently, is the fact that unlike fossil fuel powered vehicles, electric vehicles take a long time to refuel, right? Recharge. Okay. So when you're driving a gas powered vehicle and you're going on a long road trip, 500, 600, 700 miles, maybe 6 to 8 hours. When you're driving a gas-powered vehicle, all you gotta do is refuel probably once or twice max. And when you refuel each time, you're spending 5 to 10 minutes max. Very easy. However, with an electric vehicle, on the other hand, you may have to recharge or refuel 3 or 4 times. And every time you do it, it's going to take 45 minutes to an hour. And who knows whether or not the charging station you get is actually going to be functional, right? We really don't know because a lot of them are broken. They're not operable. And if you happen to get one, again, it's going to take you a while. So a 6 to 8 hour trip can be extended to 10 to 11, 12 hours if you're using an electric vehicle because of how long it takes to charge the vehicle. That is a fundamental problem that's going to be really hard to overcome. And that's why, or part of the reason why, along with a lot of other things I've outlined, why the market for this is just not working, why the demand for this is just not working. I think the electric vehicles are never going to work in rural America. They're not going to work in middle America. America is a country where you have a lot of people that live outside of big cities. I think in big cities, the electric vehicles will probably work, okay? Because most people will use them for short travel, okay? A lot of people use them for, Uber and rideshare and stuff like that. I think they'll work in the liberal cities. But outside of liberal cities, I just don't see them ever becoming popular. I just don't see it. They're just not as reliable as fossil fuel powered vehicles. That's just the reality of it. So, the Biden administration, again, they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and it's just not working. They're humiliating themselves with these failed government projects.
The president's goal is to have 500,000 chargers up by the end of this decade. Now, in order to do a charger, it's more than just plunking a small device into the ground. There's utility work, and this is also really a new category of federal investment. But we've been working with each of the 50 states. Every one of them is getting formula dollars to do this work, engaging them. And the first handful, again, by 2030, 500,000 chargers. And the very first handful of chargers are now already being physically built. But again, that's the absolute very, very beginning stages of the construction to come.
But
again, bruh, it's been 3 years. You built 7 or 8. You're saying that you're going to do 500,000 in 6 years when it took 3 years to build 7 or 8? Again, this is nonsense, right? This is ludicrous. These people are out of their minds. They're selling you a load of shit. This is what they're doing. And this is what they're telling the American people, bro. This is insane.
But that gets to the point about not being able to make long distance travel possible quickly if you don't have the infrastructure there to support it. So you recognize it.
Yeah, most of the charging infrastructure right now is being provided by the private sector. The reason that we're investing federal dollars is to fill in some of the gaps in areas where it is not yet profitable for the private sector to do it. Now, again, the majority of charging will happen at home. And in some senses, an electric vehicle has more in common. Fueling it has more in common with charging your phone than it does with filling up a gas car in ways that are both helpful and challenging. But that is exactly the transition that America is going through right now. And the other thing, again, is the price, right? We have seen the cost of EVs fall to now where it's within a few percent of an equivalent gas car. Depending on the model, you may come out ahead now.
Yeah, so you've seen that, you heard that, okay? Good job by this reporter, right, of presenting the facts to the Biden administration. We know they don't like facts. They usually don't get these types of interviews where, they get presented with the facts to push back against their agenda, right? Usually in most interviews they do. I mean, it's a lot of ass kissing and stuff like that. But again, this lady, did a great job of actually really just saying, listen, this is not working. Your investments in this don't seem to, be producing a positive return on investment. The fact that you have the government trying to subsidize a market that's not profitable, right? If the private sector says, hey, it's not profitable to do this, then it probably shouldn't be done, right? That's the great thing I love about capitalism is that that a project is worth doing if you can actually profit from it, right? That means that there's probably some positive externality. That means that it's something that makes people's lives better. It's something that people want, okay? Again, that's the beauty of capitalism here. And the fact that it's not profitable to do these things, but you have the government stepping in to try to do them, tells you that, hey, maybe it shouldn't be done, okay? I mean, that's just how capitalism works. But again, when you end up with, what's happening right now, which seems to be corporate socialism that the government is pushing in order to try to force a market that's not there, what you end up with is results like these, right? That are disasters where you spent billions of dollars and you've got minimum, right? A minimal return on investment for it. Again, it's quite embarrassing. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.